Item 7A is a Q&A with the county appraiser. Go ahead and come up. Mr. Plank, if you don't mind, I'm sure your office has been busy. We've been getting questions, and I know you've been getting questions, and I wanted to give the appraiser the opportunity to address the community and the commission. And so if you want to provide us a little feedback on what's going on, and then we might take some public comment on that, and then we'll ask some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the invitation, by the way, to present some of the stuff that we've been seeing. I did provide a packet that's available on the agenda online. It's available for anybody who wants it, the public or whoever. I'm Michael Plank. I am the county appraiser. I'm here to answer some questions regarding valuations and methodology and things like that. So I want to open just by going over some of the basics, and then I'll do my best to answer anybody's questions. Everything we do in our office is statute-driven. It's statutory. So in other words, it's mandated by state law. Like any other county employee, the appraiser is a public servant. We're working for the good of the taxpayer to place fair and equitable values on real and personal property, again, in accordance with state law. In general, county appraisers are responsible for discovering, listing, and valuing all real and tangible property within their jurisdiction, with certain exceptions for oil and gas, public utilities, and some personal property. County appraisal offices must comply with Kansas statutes, Kansas regulations, and directives issued by the Director of PBD, as well as the current version of the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practices, commonly known as USPAP, including the USPAP Ethics Rule. Everything our office does, again, is statutory. We do not take any direction in appraisal practice or in setting any specific values or trends from a county commission, from a city council, from a school district, or any other taxing entity. All 105 counties in Kansas utilize a computer-assisted mass appraisal system called a CAMA, C-A-M-A, to value everyone in their jurisdiction in accordance with the uniformly and equally standard described in valuation statutes. The common interpretation of uniformly and equally means applying the same methodology in valuing every parcel, not necessarily ensuring every parcel adjusts a similar amount or a similar percentage. Unlike a bank appraiser or a private appraiser in mass appraisal, the county is not trying to hit a target number on any individual property, a sales price, a refinance, a lower tax valuation, etc. Instead, again, per statute, we're simply trying to determine a fair market value based on the data we have available using the same methodology for every parcel. We have three commonly accepted approaches to appraisal. We have comparison sales, which is utilized mostly in residential, and we have cost and income, primarily for business or special use properties. Per KSA 79-503A, the county applies all three methodologies when appropriate. And that's all just a long way of saying this. Appraisers simply report the market as of a specific date. In our case, the state mandated date of January 1. We do not create value. People determine value by their transactions in the marketplace. The appraiser's office has the legal responsibility to analyze those transactions and appraise individual properties based on what we see happening on the open market. For 2023, we saw another substantial increase in both residential and commercial valuations in Reno County. For residential properties, again, this is primarily driven by sales. We're trying to report on what we see in the marketplace. Therefore, for the 2023 valuation, we looked at sales that occurred in 2022. In fact, here in Reno County, we actually look at the last 3 years of sales to determine our trend. Whenever a sale is recorded, we review that sale to determine if it is what we refer to as a valid open market transaction, as described by 79-503A. We review the listing, we visit the property, and when possible, we interview the buyer or the real estate agent. Since residential properties are valued by what is selling around them, it is vital that we get our sales data correct. In most areas, 2022 sales trended higher than 2021 sales. 2022 sales were much higher than 2019 sales. And since we're looking at 3 years of sales, one of the drivers in the increased valuations this year is due to dropping off the 2019 sales and adding the 2022 sales to our available comparisons, since 2022 was a much stronger seller's market than 2019 was. The result is that our values are catching up to recent sales, which can be visualized by looking at a rolling average of valid sales over the last 3 years, which was supplied in the packet. Countywide, validated sales prices are up over 26% from just 5 years ago. We also look at something called paired sales. A paired sale is a property that is sold multiple times within a certain time frame. We look for such sales that have had no changes made to the property in between sales. This indicates what we call a time trend. Our paired sales analysis indicated an annual trend of just over 20% during 2022. But note that overall values did not increase by an average of 20% because this is not the only statistic we are analyzing. So as prescribed by statute, we're looking at sales, we're following trends. We are simply reporting on what happened in the market over the last 3 years. So yes, your value can adjust even by a significant amount if nothing changes on your property. With a field staff of 7 residential appraisers and a parcel count of over 35,000 here in Reno County, it's obviously not physically possible to visit every property every year, let alone do an interior inspection on every property. Statute requires appraisal staff to visit property a minimum of once every 6 years, referred to as a 17% inspection. 1 divided by 6 is approximately 17%. However, we also visit every validated sale as well as any permit that might add value, an addition or basement finish, for example. For properties that have not had a sale or a permit or were not on the 17% list, we use an appraisal principle called extraordinary assumption. All that means is this is an assumption which, if found to be false, could alter the resulting conclusion. In our case, the assumption we're making is that the property has not changed since our previous inspection. I think it is appropriate to note that in terms of the county levy, Reno County ranks in the top 15 in terms of lowest taxes in the state of Kansas. Depending on where in the county a property is located, somewhere between 20 to 25% of the total property collected goes to the county. Property tax collected goes to the county. Another way of thinking about what the county appraiser does is we distribute the budget for local taxing jurisdictions. Allow me a quick thought exercise. Let's say the total assessed value of all property in a county is $100 million. The county's budget is $1 million. That gives us a mill levy equal to 1% of the assessed value. So in an impossible example, let's say values were increased by 50% across the board, 1 year to the next. But the budget stays the same because all the taxing jurisdictions determine they don't need additional funds to function. So now our assessed value is $150 million, but the new mill levy is down to 0.67%. The value has gone up, but the tax dollars collected have remained the same. Despite raising values significantly, no additional burden was impressed upon property owners. Hopefully, obviously, it would be the same effect if valuations were cut in half from 1 year to the next. However, as community leaders and elected officials, I'm sure that you also understand that in a time of high inflation, rising interest rates, supply chain issues, and other factors that have all driven up costs, it makes it difficult to keep budgets flat. Employees expect competitive compensation and salary adjustments. Insurance and benefit costs continue to rise. Vehicle costs, material costs, supply costs have all increased recently. The dollar does not go as far as it used to 3, 4, or 5 years ago, and we see that reflected in the real estate market as well. Home sale prices are up, monthly rents are up, new construction costs, labor, materials are all up. Even here in Reno County, the inventory of homes listed for sale was historically low in 2022, and it continues to be low going into 2023, while demand continues to be high. Combine that with the historically low interest rates over the last 3 years and the more recent rise in inflation, and it's being reflected in the most recent valuations. A recent study by the Council on State Taxation ranked Kansas as having one of the top-ranked property taxation systems not only in the United States, not only in North America, but in the world. Kansas scored high marks for transparency, consistency, and procedural fairness. Not saying that system is perfect, there's always room for improvement, but I do not believe it needs any kind of major overhaul, and I would like to take this opportunity to encourage you, in your capacity as county commissioners during your interactions with state legislators, to support the system that we have and to encourage all elected officials at every level, from local school boards to the U.S. Senate, to take responsibility for tax implications. If someone disagrees with their valuation, they are more than welcome to appeal the valuation. This appeal should not be a complaint about taxes. This is a statutory process that provides an opportunity to reconcile the property to its fair market value, again, per state law. The bottom line is, could you sell this property at or above the current valuation? If the answer is yes, there's probably not much we can do. If the answer is no, we need to gather documentation to support that. Because again, we are only as good as the information we have available. Last year for 2022, we had 542 residential appeals, approximately a 1.5% appeal rate. So far this year, we're at 575, very similar number. We see the newspaper articles, we see the Facebook posts, we see the commentary on social media. There will be anecdotal incidents of properties increasing by a significant amount. For cases like these, there's almost always an explanation. Perhaps it recently sold well above the previous valuation, or maybe there was new construction on the property, or a change in use, or a remodel, or multiple factors. People like to leave these salient facts out when complaining on social media. Conversely, let's say a property's price gets slashed because it can't sell. Maybe an inspection turned up structural issues and the most prospective buyer walked away. One sale does not define the market. As I described earlier, we're looking at the market and the trends as a whole. The housing market is not crashing. Even if it does, we still have to go by what happened over the previous 3 years for this valuation cycle. Any market activity going on right now, or this summer, or this fall, won't be reflected until the next valuation cycle. So before your appeal, simply ask yourself, what could I have sold this property for at the beginning of 2023 based on what sold around me? The appeal deadline for this period is coming up on Friday, March 31st. If someone misses that deadline, they still have the option to appeal with a payment under protest when first half tax payments are due in December. So again, we are more than happy to discuss your valuation. For people who are insistent on an inability to pay their property taxes, we can refer them to the Salvation Army or to Beyond Barriers. It is my understanding, after speaking with these organizations last week, that they can assist residents in determining whether they qualify for any of the property tax relief programs that are offered by the state of Kansas. Thank you again for inviting me here to attempt to explain what it is we do. I hope the information I provided was helpful, and I am happy to answer any further questions that you may have.
Open up for questions from the commission. Commissioner Hurst?
Past experience, most adjustments on comparables were limited to a certain percent. It used to be 10% or 15%, somewhere in that category. In other words, if you make a comparison of another property and you have to adjust that because of square footage or condition or construction or depreciation, you're limited. If it goes over that certain percent, then you have to find another comparable. Is that still going right today?
That's not a process that I'm familiar with anymore. It may be it's in maybe bank appraisals or fee appraisals. It may be like a best practice or something along that, but we don't have any limits on how much of an adjustment we can make. Part of our limit, at least here in Reno County, is we're limited by, like, we have to value according to sales, right? So if we only have 5 sales in a certain area, then we're going to use those 5 sales regardless of how good of a comparison it is. We just have to attempt to adjust for any differences.
So your adjustments are based upon the same criteria that I mentioned, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
And it's an adjustment based upon past sales and so forth.
Yes,
correct?
sir.
Commissioner Bogner?
Yeah, I've protested or went through the process of trying to lower my valuations. And I noticed we talk about comparables. I was shocked that our house that we were working on was one of the comparables was in Pretty Prairie, Kansas. We're a long ways from Pretty Prairie. How do you determine the comparables? Because I would think in certain communities or certain parts of the county, a similar house would sell for different values. And if that were the case, how far out do you go outside of a specific community to get your comparables? Because we thought some of those were pretty far away and the houses did. I think you kind of addressed that with Mr. Hurst, but some of those houses didn't really compare to our house. So could you kind of fill me in a little bit how you choose those? And
Yeah.
do you really feel that's fair to take a house from somewhere distant and compare it, or ours to theirs for that matter?
So we have the county divided up, and we can provide a map to anybody who wants it, but we have the county divided up into areas that have different codes on there. And if you request your comp sheet, comparison sales sheet, that code is actually on there. So you can get an idea of, are the comparables in my quote-unquote area, right? Some areas are going to be larger than others. In the city of Hutchinson, for example, we have much smaller areas because there's more houses closer together, there's more sales. But for example, one of our largest areas is the entire western half of the county. And so you may have a property up by Sterling pull a comp from down by Langdon or something like that. Just because the population isn't as dense, there aren't as many sales. So that's kind of how we're forced to do it almost. Like I said, if there aren't any sales to compare to, then we have to go outside of those areas. So if there's only, and this is just an example, just a thought experiment, if there's only 3 sales in Bueller, then I'm going to have to go to Pretty Prairie or Arlington or a similar size area to try to find a comparable house that's not, a $500,000 house in North Hutch, for example. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, thank you for the
Like I said, those maps are available on demand. You can just come in and request it or send us an email or whatever, and we'll see it.
Marks?
Well, I had questions along the same lines as Mr. Bogner did on the comps. I think out of all the comments that I've heard from the public, that is the biggest one, that our house doesn't comp out the same as the other area where they compared it to. Now, I have personally some houses that has had that happen in the last few years where there is sales around my houses that I had there that had sold, and they comped out less than mine, yet they decided to move 17 blocks to the north. It's not the same neighborhood, it won't sell for the same price, and raised mine significantly. You're talking Pretty Prairie from Bueller, there's a huge difference
There is.
in price and what you can get in that community. Nobody's just flocking to Pretty Prairie, but Bueller, they would probably live there. I mean, and so is that a concrete thing you have no way to do anything about? One, that's my first question. I mean, I understand you got a map, I understand you have to do comps, I understand you use sales history, but
We can manually swap comps in and out if we need to. Like I said in my presentation, we use a computer-assisted mass appraisal system to help select those comps. It takes all of the sales we have available for our 3-year period, and it assigns a comparability factor to it. And one of the primary drivers of that, hopefully anyway, is it's looking for similar sized houses first and foremost. And then it looks for, houses that are close in, basement finish or in style or what, then it looks at the other factors and it tries to select the best comparables. Now we can manually override that. So, if you have, hey, this house just down the street sold for me, I'd like to see what it comps for. We can do that. But, just again, according to the data we have, we feel like these other comps are better comps for whatever reason. And if let's say you live in Bueller and you're pulling a Pretty Prairie comp, there are adjustments being made for location, for desirability, obviously for square footage or for updates or year built or whatever. Like those adjustments are still being made, and that shows on the comp sheet. And if you request your comp sheet, we're more than happy to go over that with you, to explain what these different values are, where they come from, that type of thing.
I kind of led into the second question, the requirement to do that from the state. Are you required to value something regardless, or can you just overlook it? I mean, it sounds like a pretty weird question, but you're saying that you can manipulate that and change it.
Well, yeah, we can
If you don't feel it's fair within your office, are you required to change it anyway?
Well, we're required to assign a value to all property. Is that the question, or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah.
Yes.
But and an example of that is, and I'll give you 2 different neighborhoods, I'm not going to name them specifically, but I watched this over the last cycle when this happened. One of them in a pretty predominant neighborhood went down $8,000. Their neighbors went up $22,000. That house was bigger than the neighbor's comp next to it. I have a little issue with that.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I've had two houses, like I was speaking of a particular house that I have in that neighborhood that sold around it. They were both 2 bedrooms. This one happened to be a 2-bedroom investment property, which is in great shape. And they valued mine up more than they did that one. So I didn't contest it. But I think that's a lot of the questions a lot of people have in the county is why they feel like they're singled out and picked on. I realize they're not with your formula, but
Yeah, it's really hard to pick on people when you have 7 people and 35,000 properties you have to value, right? And there's always going to be incidents like that. There, like I said earlier, there's likely a reasonable explanation for why that one went down or why that other one went up or both. And again, just ask us. We're more than happy to research it and to talk about it with.
I'd love to share that one with you at another time.
Absolutely.
First, thanks, Michael. That's all I have.
Mr. Weitzel?
All right, so these are questions I know the answer to, but these are the questions I'm getting, so I'd like you on record so that way that people that are watching can know the process and know what to do. How often can somebody appeal their property tax valuation?
You can appeal 1 time per year. You can either appeal in the spring now, right after the valuations come out, or you can appeal when taxes are paid.
Okay. Where are you located at, if they want to come
We're at
appeal?
the courthouse annex, just a catty corner from here.
Okay, so where they pay their taxes
Well, in the same building,
in the
yes.
same building, and somebody can help them find you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Signs everywhere.
All right, so valuations went up about 9.9% in the county on average for residential properties, is that right?
I think the average was 10 or 11%.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. Does this mean that taxes are gonna go up 10%?
Not necessarily. It depends on kind of like I talked about in my presentation, depends on the various taxing entities. So county commissions, city councils, school boards, fire districts, anybody who sets a mill levy, it depends on how they do their budgets later this summer.
Okay, so the county commission, the city governments, the school boards could lower the mill levy to keep the taxes the same.
They can do that, yes.
Okay, and if they don't lower the mill levy, then they actually have to vote to raise taxes, is that right?
I believe that is correct.
Okay, so, yeah, those were the questions I have. Hopefully they were pretty easy.
So,
Commissioner Bogner?
Well, I'd like to clarify something. Seems like one community's been coming up quite a bit in this discussion. I've got a lot of friends over there. On my part, it was just the distance, not saying anything about values. But I want to make that clear. It was just to denote distance and not saying anything about the community because it is a good community and we have many friends over there.
thank you.
Commissioner Bogner. Mr. Plank, thank you for being here. I think this has been helpful. You had an excellent presentation, explained a lot. I appreciate Commissioner Weitzel's point, and I want to reiterate, your job is not to increase or decrease taxes. Your job is to value property. Our job is to assess taxes at the end of the day. And so I think there's been a reasonable knee-jerk reaction amongst the community that my appraisal has gone up, that therefore my taxes are going up. But they're distinct processes, right? So you're not raising taxes. That's not your job. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm really confident just kind of going beyond appraisals now, I'm really confident this commission is going to be able to control and keep our taxes neutral or even lower this year. I think we've got the right commission to do that. I appreciate you pointing out things that are kind of beyond even your scope, but inflation impacts our ability to budget and so forth. But this commission over the last 2 years has reduced our taxes by 5% every year, and appreciate you pointing that out too. I think the challenge for us is, again, you pointed this out, we're about 20% of the total tax on everybody's tax bill. And I'm not sure the rest of the taxing entities are as excited about reducing their mill levy as we are. And I think we need to continue to lead the way in that and really encourage the rest of the taxing entities, specifically the community college, the school districts, to follow our lead in holding taxes level. And so I think a lot of focus is on the county, because at the county level you're appraising, but it's a strange situation, but we're only 20% of the total tax, and we can't control what other governing bodies do. And so I just wanted to point out the fact that I'm pretty confident this commission's going to lead in an effort to keep our taxes low. I appreciate the statistics you listed that we're in the top 20% of the lowest taxes, county taxes in the state. And so, like I said, I'm confident we're going to do our job, and I just want to make an early challenge to the rest of the governing bodies in the county to lower taxes this year to help offset what's going on in the market that you have no control over yourself. So thank you for being here. This was very informative. As you stated, there's still time until Friday for anyone that doesn't agree with their evaluation to what's the proper word for it? To appeal.
Evaluation, yes, sir.
And then if they miss that deadline, they have an opportunity to pay in protest and appeal in a second way at that point. And so I think that's one of the things we want to get out. Please, it's much more effective to go appeal than it is to post something on Facebook, right?
If I may, Mr. Priest, if you are planning on appealing, or if you've already filed your appeal, you can request information from our office. You can request sales. You can request information that we have on file about your property, about other properties, maybe properties that have sold in your area. We're happy to provide that information to you prior to the appeal, if that's what somebody wants.
And you're going to look at each one of those appeals individually, based on the facts that you find, based on the facts they present.
Yeah, it's an information gathering time for us. Is our information correct? Here's what we're seeing. What's the difference in opinion here, and how can we reconcile that?
But if you do have a situation that you really think is wrong, please contact the appraiser's office. They're more than willing to work with you.